Hello, pitbulls and parolees. My name is TBS Guyan, and we've been on a little bit of a Shadow Isles kick on the channel here recently because Riot have been on a little bit of a Shadow Isles kick. They've done a bunch of updates to some champions, and they've released some new lore for the Shadow Isles, and it seems to be in preparation for the upcoming Mordekaiser rework. Which, we don't know when that's coming, but it's probably soon, since like, it was a League of an Icon, and he's been the next one on the docket for quite a long time now. And so it seems like they're kind of laying the groundwork for him to show up. And so I've been talking about Shadow Isles lore and Shadow Isles champions for a while, and we have finally gotten to the Chain Warden himself, Thresh. And as usual in these videos, we'll be talking about his lore, his story, his background first, and there's actually some interesting stuff to talk about in there. And then we'll move on to his character design and comment on how it works, why it doesn't work, how good of a job it does of communicating the kind of person that Thresh is. So what kind of person is Thresh, really? See, what I found when I was preparing to do this video, I was like, I've got a pretty good idea of all the lores of most of the champions in League. Like, I can remember like the broad outlines of pretty much all of them, even if I can't necessarily remember the details. And then I got to Thresh, and I realized I don't actually remember anything about this guy. I've read his lore multiple times in the past, but I couldn't remember a damn thing about him. So why is that? Well, let's get into it. Sadistic and cunning, Thresh is a restless spirit who prides himself on tormenting mortals and breaking them with slow, excruciating inventiveness. His victims suffer far beyond the point of death, for Thresh wreaks agony upon their souls, imprisoning them in his lantern to torture for all eternity. So these little first paragraphs of bios are often like the elevator pitch for the champion. They're often like the briefest possible condensation of what this character is, what they're about, and how you should think about them. And then the rest of the bio is usually concerned with building out that character, explaining more about why they are the way they are, who they were, like what they want, where they came from, what's their mission in life, where are they trying to go, what are they trying to accomplish. And Thresh is a little bit, just a bit different. By the way, my voice is a little bit of a mess right now because I've been talking for a hell of a long time. Both today and yesterday already, and it puts a stress on your vocal cords. Still, Thresh is a slightly interesting character. So, on the Blessed Isles, before they become the Shadow Isles, Thresh is a member of an order who is devoted to gathering and protecting knowledge. This is monks or something along those lines. And this order maintains a vault of dangerous magical artifacts. Just corrupted, dangerous, like dark magic, curses, all, like literally all the worst magical stuff you could possibly think of. They piled it all into one room, and they said to Thresh, you should go and guard that, and also keep track of it and stuff. And they were like, Thresh he's strong-willed, he's methodical, he's sensible. Sure, he can do that work. And then they just kind of left him to it. The trouble is that no matter who you are, it turns out if you make a guy spend literally all of his time just like hanging out with evil magical artifacts that are trying to corrupt him, then he's going to get corrupted eventually, and Thresh becomes more and more cruel, more and more bitter. He becomes less and less empathetic, and he starts to try and visit cruelty upon the artifacts in turn, just as they are trying to taunt and corrupt him. There's a living book in the vaults that he just kind of tears apart and reassembles and tears apart and reassembles just for fun, just to cause it pain. There's a mirror with a spirit in it that he tortures by, blocking the mirror so that the spirit can't see, and then revealing it. Ah, see, I was just kidding. You can see the light again. No, you can't see the light anymore. Ha 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 ha. Suffer in darkness. He basically just does everything he can to be as miserable of a wretch as possible to every artifact that he can possibly inflict pain upon. Now, because there's no such thing as therapy in Valorant, Thresh doesn't eventually go, oh wait, wow, I'm taking this way too far. I should really kind of work on myself a little bit and try and deal with my anger management issues. No, he just gets worse. He just gets worse and worse and worse, and nobody seems to notice because he's very good at hiding what a giant piece of crap he is, which is true to life, I suppose. One day, he's given a human prisoner to watch over, a warlock who has infused himself with very powerful, dangerous magic. And that powerful, dangerous magic, amongst its effects, makes this sorcerer completely unable to be killed. He will regenerate almost no matter how much you hurt him. And so Thresh, of course, being the responsible adult that he is, says, oh, we have a human prisoner here. Well, we'll treat him humanely and with respect, and we will offer him, meals and enrichment. We'll give him some books to... No, actually, I'm just kidding. He tortures him a lot. Just just tortures him a lot. He just tears his flesh off and watches it grow back, and like flays his flesh and tears off his skin, and he's just generally is turning into a very bad person. This, of course, since there's still no therapy, escalates even further, and eventually members of the Order begin to go missing. And Thresh himself begins to grow more and more pale because he refuses to leave the catacombs anymore, basically, and he refuses to hang out with anyone else, and he becomes gaunt and all sunken in and kind of creepy and disgusting, and everybody just find him super creepy. And so when monks from the Order start disappearing, apparently, people are just like, oh man, I don't want to talk to Thresh. He's so freaking creepy that they don't even bother to investigate him at all. No one asks Thresh like, hey, creepy weird man who lives in the basement and never goes outside and spends all his time around dangerous magical artifacts. You wouldn't happen to know anything about the disappearances that have been happening recently. Would you, perchance, maybe be the guy who kidnapped people and murdered them? No, that doesn't happen. So Thresh gets away with like a lot of murder. Then the Ruination happens. The Ruination being the event that turns the Blessed Isles, which are good and fun and cool and have sunlight, into the Shadow Isles, which are absolutely none of those things. It's not exactly clear from Thresh's bio whether he has anything to do with the Ruination happening, but I do remember that in multiple other lores, it is implied that when the Ruined King reaches the Blessed Isles and casts the spell that will ultimately destroy the entire island chain, he does it in the middle of a whole bunch of magical artifacts. Like, he basically causes a chain reaction among the magical artifacts that causes his spell to completely destroy the entire islands. It's also mentioned that a lantern-bearing wretch is the one who opens the vault to the king. It's generally assumed that that lantern-bearing wretch is Thresh, because, you know, of course it is. But that's not mentioned anywhere in his bio, which is a little bit strange. Like, that's no part of his bio whatsoever. And so I'm not 100% clear on whether that is still canon anymore. That it is Thresh who, more than perhaps any other character, enables the ruination of the Blessed Isles by letting the king into the vault full of dangerous magical artifacts that will ultimately cause the ruination. Thresh, though, like, everything is ruined forever. The Shadow Isles suck, and it's just terrible to be there, and there's nothing but, like, ghosts that hate everything and want to kill you. And Thresh wakes up, and he's like, well, I'm a ghost now. This is awesome! I get to be immortal now, and I get to torture everybody forever and be a complete bastard until the end of time. And he's very happy about that. The end. And that's kind of all there really is to Thresh's story, is like he was a huge bag of dicks in life, and then he died, and then he became an even huger bag of dicks with superpowers. And that's it. He doesn't really have a goal. He doesn't really have an ideology. He doesn't have anything he wants to achieve, anything he wants to do, anywhere he wants to go, anyone he wants to particularly kill. Like, he wants to kill everyone eventually, but it's just, nah, whatever. Yeah, just, so long as I can torture people, Thresh is apparently he's just happy as long as he can kill someone and make it miserable. And this is reflected also in his color story, The Collection, which is kind of hardly really worth going through because it's literally just Thresh being Thresh. It's a story about one man who is chosen to torture and the many inventive ways in which he tortures him. It's literally just a story about how Thresh is a huge bag of dicks to a guy for no good reason, and he seems to have fun doing it. He also has a cameo appearance in the story we've talked about before, The Echoes Left Behind, where he again shows up as an important but fairly minor side character who's like kind of just there to be a dick to as many people as possible and enjoy being a dick to them, and then he doesn't do anything, and then he kind of leaves the story. And so, when I could not remember what Thresh's lore was, I think I have discovered why. It's because it's entirely perfunctory. It's kind of pointless. Like, not to say that it's not interesting or anything, but the lore, insofar as being a part of the character, is kind of doesn't really matter, because who Thresh was before the Ruination is pretty much the same person he was after. And that's kind of interesting, really, because Riot, with a lot of their villainous characters recently, like I'm thinking of Urgot, Swain, characters like that, even Darius, like characters who used to be unambiguously more just kind of monstrous and evil and villainous, have turned more and more towards, you know, deeper complexity, having more layers to their narrative, like having good reasons, at least in their minds, for doing the things that they do. Like Swain has visions of a future that he's trying to prevent, like he's trying to maneuver the future into such a position that some imaginary future catastrophe is averted. Darius is trying to do the best he can while protecting the ideals of Noxus, all of that stuff. And Urgot has this whole mission about, oh, Noxus must be reminded of what strength is. We have lost sight of the true Noxian ideals. He's an ideologue. He's a rabble-rouser. Thresh is none of those things. He doesn't really have a quest. He doesn't have a thing he wants to accomplish or a person he wants to meet or anything. He just wants to kill and hurt and maim and torture people. And that's all he's ever wanted, and that's all he's ever going to want. He doesn't have an arc of a character that's going to change him, or like something that once he accomplishes it may ascend him to a final form where he becomes more powerful. He doesn't even really have a pursuit of power. He doesn't especially want to become more powerful. He just wants to be able to hurt people more. And on the one hand, that's kind of really boring. Like, because there's nothing to it. He's just a Saturday morning cartoon villain, except edgier. But on the other hand, that also makes him pretty unique in League of Legends, because, like, we have the mindless monstrosities. You have your Urgot, or rather your Cho'Gaths, and your Khazzixes, and your Kog'Maws, and stuff like that. The Void creatures who are just kind of mindless, destructive beasts that just want to kill and hurt and maim because that's what they do. That's what they're there for. But we don't really have a lot of characters who are, like, human, in the sense of having human intelligence and human agency, who are just pointless assholes, who are just pointless monsters for no good reason, except that that's what they enjoy doing. But Thresh is one such creature, and that is frankly quite fascinating. Like, there's something quite fascinating about that, in the sense of I feel like he's really the only character that I can think of off the top of my head anyway, who has a human-like intelligence, who has a backstory, who, like, presumably used to be less of a monster, but who has absolutely no depth of character beyond that. He's just a monster. And there's a reflection there in that, in real life, people who inflict pain on other people just for fun, because they enjoy inflicting pain on other people, they might pretend like they have a deeper ideology. They might pretend like there's some underlying cause or some good reason why they're doing it. But in reality, there almost never is. The cruelty is the point. The pain they inflict is the point. And that seems to be the kind of person Thresh is. Not a deep monster with a extensive background lore that lays out this coherent critique of what kind of world we live in, and this is my response to the madness of the meaningless of existence, or anything like that. He's just a bag of dicks. And there's nothing more to him. And that means that his lore is kind of boring and doesn't really matter, and there's no point memorizing it because it doesn't really affect his character or change anything about him. But it also makes him unique in the roster of League of Legends champions, and I'm a little bit conflicted on it. Like, I would probably prefer if there was, like, a little bit more of something to him, like some hint of a thing he wants to accomplish beyond just be a dick to whoever is closest at any given time. But it's interesting. It is unique. So let's move on to his character design. Thresh has a skeleton head. That's the immediate and I think the most iconic thing about him, is that he has this demonic flame-wreathed skeleton head with hooks on its hair? Dreadlocks? I don't know what they are, but they've got hooks on them. And that's sort of the first thing you notice about him and the first thing that you see. And part of the reason why is because most of Thresh's character design is actually kind of, again, kind of like his backstory. It's sleek, it's cool looking, it's got a lot of nice details and stuff, but it's also kind of meaningless. In the sense that Thresh has a bunch of details around him. Like, he's got the keys hanging from his belt, which is a good detail. Like, that indicates his status as a character who was like a vault keeper who kept the vault full of magical artifacts, and someone who was also a prison keeper, right? The keys there are a good visual signifier of a jailer. He's got the chains going on, which are a common symbol of, imprisonment, enslavement, and, being held in chains, being held in bondage. And he's got his little prison cell that he carries around with him. All of those are pretty strong design elements that indicate his role as a trapper character. Like, he's someone who throws a hook, traps you, tries to stop you from going places, erects walls around himself to make a prison that you can't run away from, and also, like, ties into his themes of cruelty, especially because there's a nice little hook on the end of his hook, appropriately. But beyond that, Thresh is actually a very simple character design in a lot of ways. Like, he's got these weird skull faces going on. on his hips and like around his back and stuff like that, which are just kind of there. Like, they're symbols of death, so it makes sense as a symbol that he is undead and as a symbol of evil, but they don't really communicate anything about him as a character. Like, he's undead and he's evil, which, like, yeah, I saw his skull face and his gauntlets. Like, this doesn't really tell me anything. He's also got the coat, which has all these bone things, like this bony collar with, like, bones around it, and it's got bones over his chest and bones over his shoulder and bones around his back and bones in a spine down his back here and bones on the side of his coat. They, again, are just like, he's undead. This is an undead skeleton boy who's, like, not alive and also not dead at the same time. And it's all kind of just restating the same point over and over again. That is, he's an evil undead guy. And so his costume design is like, nothing about it is bad. It's perfectly sensible. It works, but it's also completely unremarkable. Kind of like his base lore. Like, it's well designed and it's kind of fun to look at, but it doesn't say much. It doesn't really elucidate anything about the character. It doesn't really expand on who he is or give us some clue about what he's like or how he thinks or what his ideals or his principles are, except evil and made of bones. And there is a little bit of a point to that. Like, Thresh's main outfit primarily has rather muted colors. Like, there's just gray and brown and gray with a little bit of tinge of green hanging out here and there. And we don't get the particle effects in the Teemo GG model viewer that I'm using here, but all of that is in the service of doing two things. It highlights his hands, which are glowing in-game a little bit more. It highlights his floating skull head, which is like his main character feature. It highlights his lantern, which is constantly emitting light, and it highlights his hooks. So the costume of Thresh is, in some sense, utterly unimportant. Like, what kind of clothes he wears is unimportant. He just needs to wear, like, generic evil skeleton man clothes. What matters is the prison that he carries around with him and the big lock that it's got going on. What matters is the hook by which he captures people. What matters is the hands with which he throws those things around, like with which he does the torturing that he does. And what matters is that his head, his face, is a pale mask. Like, he's literally just a mask floating in the air because there's no substantial background to him. There's nothing substantial about him. Like, he doesn't have a head, even, which you can see in the splasher. Like, he doesn't have a head. He doesn't have a neck. He doesn't have an anatomy. He's just a mask, mask of cruelty floating in space, wreathed in fire, signifying nothing, hiding no deeper meaning, hiding no deeper truth beneath itself. And in that sense, like, I feel like, again, Thresh is painfully generic in his outfit. Like, he just looks like a generic undead villain guy from any Diablo game, or like any fantasy, like dark fantasy game in the last 20 years. He could be a character design from there. There's very little about him that's very specific to League of Legends or Valorant, or tells us anything about the Blessed Isles, from which, like, where he came from. Like, is he wearing the outfit of the Order? Is he wearing, like, the monk outfit of the Order, and then some chains and bones have kind of been strapped on top of it? Or is this, like, did he get a cool, badass undead outfit when he transformed? It's not clear. Nothing hints to his past, nothing hints to where he came from or who he used to be. There's no sense of a uniform being worn by this character, or that he cares at all about, or rather that the outfit reflects his inner life at all, because he doesn't have one. And in essence, Thresh is he's an interesting case study as a character, because part of the point of him is that he's empty. Like, there's nothing to him. He's just evil. He's just evil and cruel, and there's no point thinking about him any deeper than that. But on the other hand, that's also like, yeah, but wouldn't it be kind of better if there was more to him? And I'm honestly not sure what the answer is there. You can let me know down in the comments, but Thresh is he represents the banality of evil, essentially. Like, the fact that evil likes to justify itself with high-minded ideals, but it isn't. It's mundane, it's boring, it's kind of insignificant and unremarkable in its conception and its execution. Evil and cruelty are evil and cruel for the sake of being evil and cruel. They're not in the service of any higher ideals. They're not in the service of making the world better or even necessarily making it worse. They're just impulses. And in that sense, he's a good representation of that. Like, he's a good representation of that emptiness, that complete lack of content of character with his painfully generic outfit and the entire design being focused only around his limbs and his floating mask head. But on the other hand, wouldn't it also be a better design and a better character if there was a little more to him, if there was a reason to remember his lore, if there was a reason to care about what kind of person he is, beyond just, oh, he's evil and he wants you dead because he's got all the moral complexity of a Captain Planet villain, basically. And I'm torn. Like, I feel very negatively about it on one hand, because, like, it feels a little, yeah, he's cool, but he's nothing beyond that. But on the other hand, it's also kind of cool that that's the point. And I don't think I can really get any closer to a conclusive answer at this point, so let's end the video here. If you've enjoyed this video, you can hit the like, comment, and subscribe buttons, which are good because YouTube numbers and YouTube likes numbers, and that means I get to have a channel and do this thing if the YouTube channel doesn't crash and burn. So make the numbers go up and you make me very happy. If you want to help me out directly, you can head on over to Patreon, where you can sign up for a monthly subscription if you want to. And like, as I tend to say at the end of these videos, $1 on Patreon, or like as a tip, is worth like 1,000 views, maybe sometimes as many as 2,000, depending on where the ad revenue is at these days. So even a very small contribution can make a big difference, not just to me, but if you have another content creator who you like more than me, then I encourage you to go and subscribe to them and help them out, because the direct support is so much more valuable than ad revenue, always. And nobody wants to rely on ad revenue. If you don't want to do a monthly subscription, of course, you can also do a single one-time tip to say, hey, you made a good thing, good job, here's $2, you can get yourself a cup of coffee or something. There's links to that down in the description as well. Of course, if you don't want to do that, or if you can't do that, then I completely understand. Money is tight for everyone, including me, and I don't expect anyone to do it. I take it as kindness. So no, I sometimes get messages from people who feel bad that they can't donate, and please don't, never feel bad about that. It's a gift if you give something. So, so there's that. What else? Right, if you have not enjoyed this video, well then feel free to head down below and hit the dislike button. Just hit that button. It has done its time, perhaps. It's been imprisoned for a very long time on YouTube, but, well, it's at our mercy, isn't it? It is a cruel thing. It has only ever done harm to YouTube channels, and yet it expects us to show it mercy? I say, hit that dislike button. Hit it. Hit it. Destroy it. Break it! Show it the meaning of cruelty. Show it the meaning of despair. Thank you very much for watching.